Right. Friends, Romans, and countrymen. That would be very appropriate for here because that's where Romans lived, actually. Remember, we said this is one of the Gentile towns, the Decapolis, one of the Decapolis cities. The name of this in the Old Testament was Beit Shan. Can you see the hill, the hump in front of us? Can you see this hump? That was the Old Testament city. The Old Testament city. The Old Testament city's name was Beit Shan. And you can see it's quite large. Larger than anything we saw so far. Bigger. And the reason for that, the city flourished actually 5,000 years ago, was established 5,000 years ago, and it was established because of its location on the Via Maris. Remember the Route 66? As a matter of fact, if you look there towards this hill, you can see the valley that goes to the left and to the right. You see that? To the west and to the east. And that's the end of the Armageddon Valley. We were at Armageddon Valley at the west before. Remember at the city called Megiddo? The city of Megiddo locked up the western boundaries of the Armageddon Valley, the city of Megiddo. And this city, the city of Beit Shan, locks the eastern boundary, because right here you can see this valley from the left to the right, from the west to the east, the Armageddon Valley, Jezreel Valley, and the valley that follows the Jordan River that we were driving, the Jordan River from the north to the south, from the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea. So you can see it's an important junction. Two big valleys are here. So the city controlled, the route controlled those two big valleys, and that's why it became an important, big, powerful city. It's a good thing on one. It's on the one hand, it's a good thing, but on the other hand, obviously, all sorts of kings wanted to conquer it. And what is mentioned in the Bible, that the city was occupied by the Philistines. The Philistines in the days of Saul. And remember we mentioned that Saul was killed by the Philistines nearby Mount Gilboa. I'll show it to you. It's basically on my right. Mount Gilboa. You cannot see it from this point, but a little further where we'll see that. And then the Bible mentions that when Saul was killed, the Philistines came to the battlefield. They identified Saul. Remember, he was taller, bigger than everybody else. And he and his sons were only folks in the Israeli army that had metal weapons. Everybody else had bronze. So they found them, and they took off the armor, and they cut the head of Saul's body, decapitated him, and took his body naked, and put his body on the walls of Beit Shan. Okay? That is just for shame. All right? And then we read in the last chapter of the first book of Samuel that people from Jabesh Gilead, remember all these mountains on the east on my right is Gilead, and there was a city called Jabesh or Yavesh, Gilead. Okay, and they came, they marched overnight. They came at night to the walls of Beit Shan, snatched the body of Saul and Jonathan, and took the bodies of the king and his sons and took them to Jabesh Gilead, and they buried them there. Why particular from Jabesh Gilead? You might remember it's a fascinating story that when Saul was a young man, Jabesh Gilead was attacked by the Midianites. Well, actually, they came from the area of today's Amman. So the king of this folks was a fellow named Nahash. He attacked Jabesh, besieged Jabesh, and guess what he said to the people, to the residents? He gave condition of surrender. And what was the conditions of surrender? That people of Jabesh will gash their eye, one eye, and bring it to King Nahash. How about that? One eye. Now, folks in Jabesh were terrified, and they cried out for help, and guess what? No one helped. Except this one tall guy from the tribe of Benjamin. His name was Saul. He said, guys, if they do it for them, next, they will do it for us. Let's go fight. So he collected the group of soldiers, dashed to Jabesh, killed Nahash, released people of Jabesh, and that's why they actually came to rescue him, when his body was hanging on the walls of Beit-Shean. So that's the story in the Old Testament that we know about Beit-Shean. Then David, when he became a king, he crushed the power of the Philistines. So this city became part of the northern kingdom. And then we remember that the northern kingdom fell in the year 722. We remember that. And then there was nothing here until the days of Alexander. So Alexander came and he established the city of the ruins of which you see right now. That's the city that was established by Alexander the Great and lasted for about 1,000 years. 1,000 years. And it was conquered by the Muslims in the year 638. And it lasted for about 100 years. It was destroyed by an earthquake. And funny enough, because it was destroyed by the earthquake, that's why it's preserved so well. People were afraid to come and settle right there. Because of the earthquake, they were afraid, so they moved a little bit away. And that's why the archaeologists were able to come and find out such a well-preserved city. And you really see it's well-preserved. It has all these elements of the pagan city that we mentioned before. Remember when we talked about Caesarea? Would you remember to recall those elements that we talked about? The temple, the pagan temple. In this case, there was more than one. There was a pagan temple on top of the hill, and there was a pagan temple at the bottom of the hill, dedicated to Dionysius, god of wine, for example. Okay. What else? What are the other elements that we... That's in a temple. That's in a temple. Okay, what else? Entertainment, theater, and that's what you see. There's a well-preserved theater, really nicely preserved theater right here, right in front of us. I would highly recommend you to go down and check it out because it's really, really well-preserved. It's a perfect acoustics and nice, and you'll enjoy being it's very easy to access. Then remember, we stopped at the place of the games, the gladiators fighting, and the a small coliseum there. We saw that at the beginning. What else? Come on, folks, you should not forget about the red light district. Every respected pagan city would have a red light district. It's a must. When I visited the city of Ephesus, it was so interesting that the red light district is had an underground passage to library. You know, when you sit in a library, get tired. Right. Go into the underground passage, zip across the square, and you are in a nice, entertaining environment. And also, can you friends see the roofs on the left behind the tree? Roofed area. That's the bathhouses, Roman bathhouses. What do you do in the Roman bathhouses? You do a symposium. Anybody went to a symposium? Ever? Symposiums? Yeah. Okay. Alan, next time your husband goes to symposium, please check it out because in ancient times it was a drinking party. They, in the bathhouses they would have those parties where they will entertain themselves. Next door to the bathhouse is the red light district. They will invite those women over there, but more than that, they will invite men. Yeah. How about that? Nymphaeum, this is where water was, fountains. So all those nice and entertaining areas were here. What's the reason? Why am I telling you all that? I have a reason for that. Because I would like to prepare you, give you somewhat of a background for the story of a prodigal son. You remember this story very well. It's a parable that Jesus told the disciples. And it was probably told near here, where we are. Why is that? Remember, Jesus would come to Jerusalem from Galilee. And we figured out where in Galilee he lived. Anybody remembers?
Capernaum.
Capernaum. Capernaum. He lived permanently in Capernaum. So he would travel from Capernaum to Jerusalem. 4 days. And what he will do, he did with what we did. Just not by bus, but by foot. He walked, right? He walked from Capernaum. Remember, we left Capernaum and we ended up here at Beit Shan. It's about an hour drive. About an hour drive. So whenever we drive an hour, it's about a day walk in ancient days. So by the time they got to Beit Shan, they were very tired. And the options were, for the pilgrims in the days of Jesus, the options were to cross the Jordan River to Jabesh, to area of Jabesh, because it was Jewish area, and continue on the other side, or come to this city. And this is most likely what the disciples maybe wanted to ask Jesus, just to come for relaxing time. Somebody asked me about the spa at the next hotel. Isn't that great, right? To have a spa. There's a bathhouse right here. So you can have a spa. By the way, you can have a symposia there as well. Or you can come to the Gladiators ring, and what do you do there? You watch a nice fight, and you can also gamble. They found mosaics that has a picture of an interesting goddess that they worshipped, named Fortuna. Fortune, we say in English, but it's Fortuna, right? It's what do you call it?
Latin.
Gambling, yeah, Latin, in Latin for fortune, gambling. So maybe the disciples wanted to have a little bit of relaxing time here, and so they said, Rabbi, how about if us go in there? And Jesus would give them a parable. And where do we find it? Let me find it. First, we will be somewhere in Luke, all right? Let's see. Look. All right, who's the pastor in this group? Can you Luke 14, 15? Thank you. That's exactly right. 15. Thanks a lot. A man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Jesus said, "Father, give me the share of the real estate that I have coming to me." So he distributed the assets to them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered together all he had and traveled to a distant country where he squandered his money in the wild living. Okay, and that's exactly right. And that's what I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you this city as an example of this wild living. Now, why this city in particular? Because remember what happened to this guy? And after he had squandered everything, by the way, how can you do that? When you gamble, right? When you gamble and things like that, a severe famine struck that country and he had nothing. He went and worked for one of the citizens of that country who sent him to the field to feed pigs. And we can draw a conclusion. That's a non-Jewish country then. Non-Jewish city, because the Jews will not raise pigs. There's nothing they can do with it. They cannot eat it. Cannot use the skin or bones of it's unclean. So it must be a Gentile town. So this one is a perfect example. This one is a perfect example of a Gentile town that was on the pilgrimage way of the Jewish people that would go from Galilee to Jerusalem. All right? So I thought that if you browse around and look at it, on the one hand, you say what a highly civilized society it was, but on the other hand, it is highly civilized pagan society it was. And the reason it's interesting to study, in my opinion, is that we live today in the West in a highly civilized pagan society, unfortunately. Okay, and that's our struggle with paganism on the one hand, and our Christian values on the other hand. When I gave this spiel, I had this interesting experience, friends. I wanted to share this with you. That I had this spiel with the people once, and I didn't realize it was a group from Las Vegas. So they kind of looked at me. They gave me this look, and I thought, oh, no, seriously, right? Do I preach to the right crowd? I mean, they were. I was embarrassed a little bit and confused, but I said, well, what shall I do? Well, that's what I think. That's all wrong. In Israel, for example, gambling is forbidden by law. We don't gamble. Well, legal gambling is forbidden. See, that's the question. Is it good or bad to go gamble? For example, one thing. Okay? Entertainment. For example, these people had to go see the gladiators fighting. Is it good or is it bad? Imagine yourself, back then. Would you go and watch the gladiators fight? No. Why not?
Because it's wrong.
Why it is wrong? It is wrong. Why?
Because you're beating someone. You're harming them.
Quote me the Bible. Murder. Thou should not murder. It's a purposely murdered. More than that, for the sake of entertainment. For the sake of entertainment. Can I, if you're not tired, one more sentence about an interesting discussion that was between the rabbis in the days of Jesus, whether the Jews shall go and participate or watch the gladiators fighting. Most of the rabbis, like you, said, you should not go because the Lord said I should not kill. There was one rabbi who said, no, you should go. So they were all perplexed. They turned to the rabbi and said, Akiva, tell us, what's your reasoning for that? He said, imagine that a Jewish person is fighting amongst the gladiators fighting. Can you imagine the Jew fighting amongst the gladiators? We have documents that there were Jewish slaves to the Romans that were thrown to fight. So imagine that a Jew is fighting there and you are in the crowd. Remember what happens sometimes when the crowd has to decide to live or die? So you would be in the crowd, and then you can do what? Save a life of a Jew. So that was the reasoning. It's just like an example for you, a little example for you. So, another rabbi was asked, because he was in the bathhouse once. And the paparazzi, those paparazzi made a picture, ancient picture, whatever it was, in the ancient newspaper, whatever it was, and the rumors came that the rabbi came to the bathhouse. And in the bathhouse they had a statue of Aphrodite. And usually the statue of Aphrodite is not really covered. Anyway, he was asked by the disciples, Rabbi, what are you doing with the Aphrodite? Next to this naked Aphrodite, what do you do? He said, no, students, I didn't come to Aphrodite, Aphrodite came to me. In other words, I didn't go there, this Roman culture came to us. So that was an interesting discussion, even in those days, what to do with things like that. So there's an interesting balance, or how can we keep our values and not be a part of the pagan world. It's very, very interesting, and this sort of complexity is not gone, and oftentimes we have to make a decision what kind of movies we want to see, or what kind of entertainment we want our children to go to, and things like that. And I hope that the parables of Jesus in this case can help you to make a right decision. Because remember what this guy decided to do, the young fellow? He said, look, I'll go back to my father. I'll go back to my father. Right? And I will become what? A hired man. A slave to my father. All right, so he goes to his father, and you remember what his father did, right? He actually welcomed him, not put him in a slave position, but he actually welcomed him. And the parable is told to show you how much our Father in heaven can treat you, even if you go astray. So if you think about this parable, is it really a parable of the prodigal son? Or maybe it's a parable about a forgiving father. Okay, and this clash of cultures is very interesting. You saw the Jewish world. We were at Chorazin, we were at Bethsaida, we were at Capernaum. You saw the Jewish world, very simple, very humble, whatnot. And now you see the Roman civilization here. This clash of cultures is so very interesting that should prompt us to think: where do we belong? What do we do? What kind of decisions do we make? Really. All right, so it's all yours, friends. Let's just fix the time. How about 4:45?